Welcome to Toy Polloi.
Hello and welcome to another video from Toy Polloi, and today we're going to be restoring these two rather busted and broken Laser Light Skeletors. Now Laser Light Skeletor was one of the later releases from the Masters of the Universe line, and he's actually quite a hard figure to come by, and that seems to be mainly because he's very easily broken. As you can see here, the remains of the two here are pretty battered and beaten up. Now these bits were very kindly donated to me a few months back by Bass. He sent me a whole box full of sort of broken and damaged He-Man figures, and in there was a bag that contained this, and it's been a project I've been really wanting to do for quite a long time, so I've just been sort of hunting down parts and getting the bits I need to be able to restore them, and I think I now have all the bits that I need to get both of these back up and running. But as you can see, they're in a fairly sorry state, so let's take a closer look at the figure and I'll talk you through what's wrong with him and what we need to fix. So here are the two Laser Light Skeletors, and I've split them into sort of separate figures because there are definitely parts for one and parts for another because they're different colours. So the guy on the left is actually not in too bad condition. This is probably the least damaged of the two. You can see his legs are still attached to the pelvis and the legs still work quite nicely. The upper body was already split apart when I got this, so you can see the internals, and actually the internals of it are in not too bad condition. The bulb has blown that goes into his head, and his right arm is really mashed up. Something has happened there. It looks like it's been chewed away. He's missing his hand and the bulb is gone, so we're going to have to replace this entire arm with a replacement. But the rest of him is sort of looking fairly reasonable. I did have a look at the head, and you can see this has also been broken apart at some point. Someone has snapped the back of that off. It still has a little eyepiece in there. The bulb is supposed to go up and it lights through those eyes, but you can see that the back of that has been sort of broken, so I may be able to sort of fix that back in place, or I may replace that again with a replacement piece. So he's going to be the easiest to fix up. We've really basically got to rewire him and get him working. The battery pack is missing, but I have replacements of those as well, so that's going to be the easiest one. The one on the right I think is probably going to be more interesting because this has a few more issues with him. When this arrived, it was actually all in one piece. The leg was broken, but the figure was together, so I've very carefully cracked that open. I didn't film that because it's a bit of a sort of slow process. Basically you put a knife along the edge of the join here and gently twist it, and because of the nature of this plastic, the bits that fix it inside, it's only fixed at a few points inside, they will eventually crack. You just have to go very slowly and be very careful. I did slightly crack the chest here when I sort of was prizing it apart, but this plastic works incredibly well with plastic weld, so I've just sort of repaired that. But I was able to get him apart and see what was wrong. The pelvis had actually come apart on this one, so this was all loose and sort of flapping about, and only held together by the fact that it's sort of clamped between the torso section there, and that enabled me to get to the legs. And the interesting thing on this one was I think this is a short fill on one of the legs. You can see that this leg is very distorted. It's supposed to sort of stand upright like this one, but you can see it's very distorted and bent, and I think what's happened is when this one was cast, not enough plastic was pushed into the mould, which has made it sort of distort and go really out of shape. In fact, I'll bring in this one so you can see the sort of the difference in height of them. So this figure would have never stood up properly even when it came straight out of the packet. But also on this one, the actual mechanism that holds this into the pelvis has broken. There's this little disc that actually is supposed to have little tabs sticking out the side of it that is sort of pushed into there, and that enables the leg to rotate, but this one has snapped and broken. So I'm not going to repair this leg because it can't be repaired. Even if you heated this up in hot water and bent it sort of to the shape you wanted, because there's not enough plastic in there, it's always going to be distorted. So we're going to be replacing that as well. This one does come with the hand, but he is missing the thumb, so I'm going to be replacing that. And his arm, you know, is actually here on this one, but damaged, so we need to fix that up as well. This should be easily fixed with plastic weld, and then we can sort of replace the hands. So yeah, overall there's a lot of pieces here, and it's going to be quite a lot of work to get him working, but I think it's going to be worthwhile. You can see if I open up this one what the insides should look like. So there's a bulb inside his head and there's a bulb inside his hand, and when you press a button on the backpack it will light up. There's a AA battery should sit in here, but this one, the bulb was blown in here as well, so we need to replace the bulb in that. But yeah, there's just a lot of work to do. Now for this though, I got in touch with Barbarossa Customs, which is a place I found online that actually makes replacement parts for all of Laser Light Skeletor. You can get every piece of him. So if you've got one of these with bits missing, get in touch with them. So I got in touch with Pete, who runs Barbarossa Customs, and he's very kindly sent me a package containing all the bits I will need to fix this figure up. I've done an unboxing video on that, so I'll put a link to that in the description. You can see all the pieces he sent me. He also sent me a kit for building a Laser Light Skeletor from scratch, so I will be doing that one in a separate video. This video is just going to be concerned with restoring these broken ones here, but the kit looks like great fun. So anyway, we'll get started on this. Let's start sort of repairing these two vintage Laser Light Skeletors. We might as well start with the legs because they are going to be the easiest thing to do. So as I showed you, this leg is a short fill. It doesn't have enough plastic in there, which means that if I put this back on the figure, he's never going to stand up straight. So I'm going to class that leg as a sort of duff one, and we'll get rid of that. But it's okay because Barbarossa Customs make replacement legs. And I've actually been sent 2 bags of these. I think they might be cast in slightly different colour plastic. So I'm going to pick the one that's got the closest sort of hue to the leg that I'm trying to replace, which I think is possibly this one. So I'm going to take I need the left leg out of this bag. And you can see this is a recast of the leg. It looks remarkably good. It's got a lot of detail to it, and it's in the right sort of shade of blue plastic. It isn't painted, but that's not going to be a problem. We can paint this later on. And you can see that the little tab is already added in for the mobility part of his pelvis, but they do sell those separately. So if you've got one of these with a broken one of these sort of leg tabs, you can actually get replacements of them, which is really useful because it's the sort of thing that does break. I've seen quite a few of these Laser Light Skeletors with these broken. So this is the one that's broken on my figure, and there's a replacement, which is really nice. It's an exact copy of it. So yeah, if you have that broken, just grab some of those. But for me, we're going to replace the entire leg. Now the pelvis on this one was already broken when I was given the figure, so it's already come apart. But with these, basically you just have to sort of put a knife in and gently twist them. You're trying to break. There are 3 sort of fixing points at the top 2 edges and right in the middle of the pelvis. So if those snap, you can then get this pelvis part apart. And really the putting the legs back in is actually quite simple. This little tab here, or little peg, just goes in that hole there, and you can do the other one on the other side. So you can see that's how it fits in. It's a very straightforward design, and I've just got to glue these sort of together. So I'm going to put bits of super glue on these 3 points. We'll put the legs in, and then we'll glue it and hold it until the glue has set. When this is sort of finally put together, let me just do that so you can see, this goes inside the body of the main Skeletor figure and is then held together at the top by the main sections of the figure. So it's quite a sort of firmly held together piece. But once this is in, you can see that that leg will then rotate quite nicely, and that's quite a convincing leg. By the time that is painted up, it's going to look really nice. So let's get some glue on this and we'll get it sort of all held back together, and then yeah, we can start on the rest of the figure. Now we come onto the bodies, and this is where it starts to get a little bit more complicated because there's quite a few areas that need fixing. As I said, I've managed to split the body apart on this one, you know, with relatively sort of minimal damage, but we've still got a few bits to do to get it working. The arm on this one is completely sort of cracked at one end, but that can be repaired with some plastic weld. But what we've got to do is re-thread these cables through and add a new light. Now the lights on these are going to be 1.5 volt bulbs because this toy runs on a AA battery. So I did some research and I found that you can get these. These are called grain of wheat bulbs, and they are 1.5 volt, and they are very small, and we should be able to run 2 of those off a AA battery. So I'm going to be replacing all the bulbs with these. You can buy them fairly cheaply online. In fact, I had to buy 50 of them. That was the cheapest I could get them, so I got 50 for about £11, so they're pretty good value. And I'm going to be replacing all 4 of the bulbs on these because they're all broken. You can see it actually matches the original bulb fairly closely. There are 2 bulbs in each figure, so we've got to sort of replace those. One of them goes into the hand, and you can see on this one the hand has lost its thumb. Now previously I did buy a hand off eBay. Someone has done some 3D prints of them. I think it cost me about €11, so it's, you know, pretty much £11, but the quality of it isn't very good at all. It's really soft on the sculpting, and it's also a very sort of frosty finish. So I'm not actually going to use it. I bought it just as a test, but I don't actually think it's very good. So again, Barbarossa Customs do their own version. So this is a cast of one of the originals, so you can see that is a pretty good colour match. And he does them in various colours, because actually Laserlight Skeletor comes in quite different colours. You can see the difference in colour of the paint schemes. So he's done another one for me which is in a different shade of red. It's slightly more sort of bluey red, so I'm going to use the bluey red one on this one and this sort of vibrant red one on this one. So the broken hand I can put in a spares pot and keep that for another project. But we've got a lot to do. I think the first thing to do is actually try and get the bulb out of this one. It's held in place. I think, you know, if I split the head I would be able to get it out. I'm just going to actually end up cutting this out. On this one you can see someone has actually had a go at splitting the head and broken it, but that's where again Barbarossa Customs come into play, because they make replacements of all of these bits. So there is a replacement back part to Skeletor's head, so I can trim off the remains of that and we'll get that one fitted onto that. You can see that this arm is irreparable, it's got so much damage to it. So again, here is a resin cast of one of those arms, so we're going to be swapping this arm out for that one, so we can have a complete replacement arm there, and that should look pretty good. So we've got a lot to do. I'm not going to talk my way through all of this. Basically I'm going to tidy this one up and we'll get the bulb out of that one, and then I think I do need to bend some of these metal plates, so I will be doing that as well. This is the contacts for where the battery goes, so you can see the spring there and a little plate there on the back. This one has bent slightly, but it's only held in with a screw, so I'm just going to unscrew that, bend it back and put that back into place. But really, let's get some of this prep done before we'd have to do the sort of the main jobs, which are soldering. Okay, so I've had a slight sort of issue with this one. I cut the bulb fitting off, thinking that the bulb would then just sort of pull out, but actually it's fallen inside the head. You can just about see it in there. And if I try and split this head, I can already see it starting to crack exactly where the other head had broken. So I don't want to sort of force this head open. You can actually hear the bulb sort of rattling inside it. So what I'm going to do is just work around it. I'm going to leave that bulb in there, and I think this new sort of grain of wheat bulb will still fit inside there. It will just mean that this head will rattle slightly, but I don't want to break something unnecessary, and I think we can just sort of work around it, and that when that's in and lighting up, his eyes will still light up. There shouldn't be any sort of issues with that. I can see this plastic has got very brittle, and I can see exactly why all of these Laserlight Skeletors that you find have broken bits on them. The plastic is just very brittle, and if I try and split this, you can see there is a crack forming along here where it's going to sort of split exactly as the other one did. Although I do have a replacement back of the head, I'd rather try and keep this all original if I possibly could, so we'll just go with that. Right, I think we're sort of getting somewhere now. Basically, these are all sort of minor little modifications I'm making. So bending these contacts so that they now sit sort of nice and square back where they should do should mean that when I come to put the battery packs in, we do actually get a contact there. I also took the time to clean these contacts. They've got a little bit of sort of dirt on them, but not a huge amount. I'm just using a contact cleaner, which I've shown you a few times in videos. It's basically a sort of glass fibre that you can use to scratch the surface of the metal. It takes all of the tarnish off. So that one is all ready to go. We just have to replace the bulbs. Likewise, this one is looking a lot better. That contact is now in the right place, which is what we wanted. Now for the bulbs, as I said, I'm using these things called grain of wheat bulbs. They are tiny little things, and the reason I'm using these is because they run off 1.5 volts. And if we take a look at the battery pack, you can see that it fits one AA battery, which is 1.5 volts. So 1.5 volts will run this bulb very nicely. If I was to swap this out with LEDs wouldn't work. The lowest voltage LED is a red LED, and that takes at least 3 volts. So we need to use something that takes a lot less voltage. So we can check that this is working. So I've just put this is a AAA battery, but it's still 1.5 volts. You can see if I touch these two contacts, it lights quite nicely, and we can do 2 of these in parallel. We're not going to do them in series. If you do 2 bulbs in series, they won't light. So this needs to be in parallel, which is exactly how this wiring is set up here. You can see we have 2 wires going to the bulb that should be in the head and 2 wires to the bulb that should be in the arm. Now it's interesting to note that these have different coloured wires on them. I'm guessing this is different factories. You can see what a sort of different colour the paint is on these, and the figures actually have quite a few sort of subtle differences like that. So I'm guessing different factories use different paint and different wires. So what I've got to do is basically solder a bulb onto the end of here and onto the end of here. We'll take that bulb off, and then we'll replace it, and we'll put a bulb on here. On this one I do actually need to thread these wires through this arm. As I've shown you before, trying to split this plastic, it's very brittle and will crack, so I need to thread these wires back through here, which I believe will be possible, but it may take a little bit of perseverance. So let's thread these wires first, and then we'll get the soldering iron out and solder these lights on and check that everything works. But yeah, it should all be possible. That all went really quite smoothly. I got all the bulbs working, and I've actually I think I've slightly improved what was done originally. I put a bit of heat shrink just on one of the contacts for the bulbs, because I can see the original bulbs didn't have that, so it would be very easy for these 2 wires to touch together and short. So I've just added a little bit of heat shrink just to stop that from ever happening. I also melted the bit of plastic here that holds in this bottom contact, the bottom battery contact. On this one it's been melted, but on this one it hadn't, so maybe again it's just a difference between factories, but melting it holds that in really quite nicely. So now we can go ahead and start actually sort of putting these back together, but I've got to do a bit of gluing first. On this one with the broken hand, I'm going to be using some plastic weld to just attach this piece, but I want to be very careful how I attach this, because This hand, the clear plastic hand, needs to be able to rotate, so I just want to plastic weld this piece to the main arm and not get any on of this red clear plastic. So that's going to be quite a delicate job to do, but I think it can be done, and then once that's done, that will be fine, and we can put that one back together. On this one, we need to do a little bit more. I've got to put his head back together, so this is the sort of modern cast from Barbarossa Customs to go on the back of the head. And I've tidied that up a bit. I've just sort of tidied some of the edges up so it really fits quite nicely. So I'm going to super glue those two pieces together, because this is a sort of solid, more styrene based plastic, and this one's got a bit of flex to it. So I think super glue will work nicely on that. And then we also have to do his arm. I've obviously got to feed this light through and get that in the right position, and then put his hand on. And again, I am going to super glue this. The plastic has got a little bit of flex to it, so a bit of super glue on all of the little points, and then that should be fine. And to apply the super glue, I'm not going to just sort of put it straight on from the bottle. I'm actually going to put it onto a bit of paper and then use one of these dotters to carefully put the super glue only where I need it, rather than sort of putting it everywhere. So let's get all of these bits glued and sort of attached, and then we can actually construct Skeletor again and see that he works. Right, well, the glue's all had time to dry and everything seems to have stuck quite well. So that's the head super glued together. So that's the new back of the head and an old front with the eyes still in place. And they're the old eyes. You can get, again, replacements of the little red part for the eyes. So that one has stuck nicely. This arm was done using plastic weld, and I was very careful not to get the plastic weld on the hand, so the hand still rotates. This arm, I'm going to say, is going to be fairly weak. The plastic already feels quite brittle, so it may be in future I actually have to come back and replace this arm with one of the sort of modern casts. But for now, I think that will do the job quite nicely. And then this arm here, this is the replacement arm. So we've got replacement hand and replacement arm, and that's all super glued pretty well. I did tidy up the edges of this as best I could so that there's not too much of a seam. You can see a little bit of a seam there, but yeah, overall the effect is good. And now we can put these two Laser-like Skeletors back together. I'm not going to glue the bodies at the moment because it may be, as I say, I come back and swap some arms, so I'm just going to sort of push fit them together. And actually this left arm here, when you push that on, it actually clamps the left side of his body together, so I think everything's going to be held quite well. In future, if I'm sort of happy with all the fixes, I'll then take it apart again and put a bit of glue in, but for now let's do it without the glue. So the process is we have to slot the arm in. That's the laser-like arm. Then we get his head and we push the bulb inside the head as far as it will go, and then sort of slot that into the neck area. Then we need to get his legs, and those slot in the bottom, and then we can put the front part of the chest on. And as I say, some of the pegs on this are still sort of viable, so I can actually push that together, and we can see that that does go quite nicely together. And then we get his arm and we'll push that on. That should go on. It's like a standard He-Man arm, you just have to sort of push and twist. It might be I need to warm that up. I think I probably will warm that up in some just boiled water in a second. I don't want to sort of overstretch these things, but the overall effect is that is going to work. Let's try the other one. Then yeah, I think I will just heat those up just to make it a bit easier. So we drop that in there. We'll do the same. So this has got the old bulb in the head, but I think there will be space to push that bulb in, which there is. We can put his legs on. like so. And then we'll get the chest and we can push that over the top. Yeah, very good. So that all moves, that all fits. And again, that arm will push on. But I'm just going to go and heat those up in some just boiled water. So basically boil some water, put it in a cup. We'll put these in just to soften the plastic. And I'll push those arms on. But I think we're getting somewhere with this figure. Okay, the arms are now back on. As I said, it's just a case of sticking them in some just boiled water. It softens it up enough that you can squeeze those over the shoulder joints. And there we go. The figures are starting to look quite good. Everything is moving as it should. The right arm can only rotate to a certain sort of height, and that's done to stop you breaking the wires inside. You can also do the same with the head. The head only rotates a small amount so that you don't break the wires inside that. And as you can see, because I haven't glued it, there is a bit of a gap there. But I'm just leaving that for the moment because I may come back to do some more work on it. Otherwise, the figure holds together quite nicely. We can test the electrics inside as well. So I've got my single battery here. I'm going to put one of the contacts on the bottom there, and then I will take the other contact and we'll tap it onto the back panel if I can get that in and lined up. And there you go, you can see that his eyes light up. I'll stop it again and light it, and his hand lights up quite nicely. We'll check the other one as well just to make sure that that does work, but it should do. I haven't really done anything to it while putting these together. Nothing should have broken or sort of been pulled apart. So we'll put that contact on the back there, and then we'll get the other wire. We'll touch it into the right position. And again, there you go, you can see that one is lighting up quite nicely. It's all working. Now, a few people I'm sure will say, why didn't I bother de-yellowing this arm and this body on this one? And the answer is because the plastic is old and it's already very brittle, and de-yellowing it does affect the plastic a bit, and it doesn't last forever. So I'm just going to leave this one as is. So it's got a bit of yellowing on that side of the body. The rest of it looks fine. This one actually doesn't look too bad. But what we do need to do now is sort out the paints. There's a few little paint chips which I may just leave on this. It's only sort of minor ones, but the new leg is unpainted, so we need to paint that up to match as best we can the sort of copper effect on this side. For the coppery paint, I'm actually going to be using some Humbrol acrylic. I have this one in my box of paints. This is number 12. Sometimes you can't get Humbrol paints anymore, so if you can't get this one, check online. There are lots of charts that convert the numbers between different ones, so if you can't get a number 12 Humbrol, you might be able to get a Vallejo one which is the same colour, so just check out some online charts. But this one is a pretty nice sort of coppery colour. It's possibly a little too light, so I have mixed in a very tiny amount of black, this is a Vallejo black, just to dull it down a bit. But you can see I've just sort of painted the end of his toe there, and you can see that's quite a nice coppery finish. So we're going to go with this one. I'm using the other laser light Skeletor I have to work out which areas need to be painted, but essentially on this left boot, it is the boot part mainly, and then a couple of little sort of lines that go up the back, and then we've got to paint this line up the front as well. So it's not a huge amount to be painted, but I want to get it so it is correct. So really what we've got to do is just get painting. So I'm going to get some paint on the brush. It might need a couple of coats just because this is a sort of quite a strange metallic paint. It doesn't sometimes dries a bit thin, but you can see that already that's not a bad colour match. I've just applied a clear coat on top of the bronzy sort of coppery colour that I've put on, and that's a satin varnish. This is a Vallejo sort of top coat. It's very useful to sort of add this over the top of whatever you paint, just gives it that extra little bit of protection. So this is 70.522, and I did do a second coat on the copper, and I've actually mixed into that sort of copper mix that I was using, so the number 12 Humbrol, I mixed in some of this, which is not a paint I particularly like using. This is a Meng colour. This is MC237. It's a sort of rusty brown colour. I just thought the copper was really very coppery. It had so much shine to it, and although this original copper has a bit of shine to it, it didn't have anywhere near as much as the sort of shiny coppery elements as the number 12 did. So mixing this in, which is a fairly similar tone of colour, actually sort of lessen the coppery shininess of it. So by the time this top coat has dried, it should look much the same as this original one, and that's really the look I'm going for. But even with the top coat, you can just about see the sort of colour match. And so here are the two figures at this mid-stage point. As you can see, they're really starting to look like quite nice displayable versions of Laser Light Skeletor. This one here is the one with the new leg, and with the paint on, that really does make quite a big difference. The match is not quite perfect, but it's as close as I think I'm going to be able to get. I've certainly toned down the shininess of the copper that was in that paint, and I'm a lot happier with how that looks. And the overall effect on that one is really very nice. Now, in the next video, we're going to be dealing with the battery supply that goes in the back of it. I have two versions of the battery pack here. This is the one from Barbarossa Customs, which is an exact copy of the original. And then I had this one very kindly made for me by Steve Noden. He cast his original version in resin. This has been painted black, and he's drilled out a hole in the middle. So I'm not quite sure which one I'll use. I've got a few bits on order. I've got some copper on order to try and make the missing part here, or I may make something with a switch in it, but I'm just sort of deciding on what I want to do, and that will be in the second part of this restoration. I also need to make a cape for both of these. Now again, I've been working on a prototype, and you can see this is my prototype at the moment. It's in the wrong sort of colour material, but it does actually work quite well, so we'll be covering that in the second part of this restoration. I do need to say a big thank you to Barbarossa Customs, who very kindly supplied parts for this, and you'll be seeing more of those in some future projects. I also need to say a big thank you to Bass, who very kindly supplied the broken up Laser Light Skeletors that were the basis of this project, and also to Steve Noden, who as I say, cast this, and hopefully you'll be seeing that in the second part of this project. If you've enjoyed this video, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching Toy Polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow Toy Polloi on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.